Back to another team preview. This one, the Seattle Seahawks. Boo! Boo! Anyway, we're going through all 32 teams, every fantasy relevant player. Make sure you drop a sub, hit the like button, and check out the playlist below in the description going over all the teams, all fantasy relevant players before the offseason gets started. All right. Now, Seattle Seahawks, obviously last year, there was a lot of hype with this team, invested 2 early round picks in receiver and running back. And the offense looked good, but it didn't look as good as it did the year before. And now Pete Carroll is out, so this offense will look a little bit different under, new offensive coordinator as well, Ryan Grubb. So this thing's going to look a little bit different, but a lot of the same cast is back. Not a whole lot fantasy-wise. It's going to change from the personnel. It's just the expectations and what we can get out of them this season. So to start things off, let's go with the quarterback position. Geno Smith, who finishes the QB 19 a year after finishing the QB 5 in fantasy. He had 3,624 yards, 20 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. And he was a lot more inconsistent than he was in the year past. And, he had 4 games over 20 fantasy points, which at the quarterback position, you want to have players who can get you over 20 fantasy points. It's the differentiator. That's the bar of being like elite versus being regular. And he only had 4 of those games last season. So under this new offensive coordinator, Grubb, the hope is that, he could be more of a drop back style passer, which he says he prefers. And so obviously, I think Geno Smith is not going to be what he was 2 years ago, but I do think he can be better than the QB 19 he was last season. He's probably going to go around there in drafts around the 17 to 20 range. So if you're looking at your super flex leagues for a guy that probably won't hurt you in drafts, Geno Smith is a good option. The only issue I see with Geno Smith is that this team also traded for another quarterback who had a really good season last year in Sam Howell. Sam Howell was a QB 12, last season. So he finished as a QB1 in standard 12-team leagues. And I don't think this is a thing where Sam Howell comes in and is trying to take away the starting gig. I think Geno Smith is the entrenched starter here. But if anything were to happen to Geno as far as injury or maybe just bad play on the field, Sam Howell is good enough to be fantasy relevant in this offense. Coming from a season in Washington where he had 3,946 yards, just under 4,000 yards passing, 21 touchdowns, a lot of interceptions, 21 interceptions too. This is a quarterback who, if he learns the offense right, he has good weapons. Reminds me a lot of like what Baker did once he got weapons in Tampa. So the Seattle team does have good personnel. It's just a matter of who's in, the position that they start in, who's on the bench, who's not, and then what this offense looks like in a new passing scheme now that Pete Carroll is gone. So Sam Howell, a name to remember, not to draft. Now, when it comes to the running backs, I've had a lot of questions this offseason about what do we do with Kenneth Walker? Now, I like Kenneth Walker a lot. I've been a big Kenneth Walker proponent. He's a good back, 1,000-yard type back. He was an RB19 last season. He's been kind of inconsistent when it comes to like big games and then games where he's under 10 fantasy points. He's been consistent as far as production. Like we know what to expect: 1,000 yards, 7 to 8 touchdowns, not a whole lot in the receiving game. RB18 and RB19 in back-to-back years. So I think the one thing that he'll need is just more big plays and more opportunities in the passing game. But the team drafted Zach Charbonnet last season, which took away a lot of the passing game work from Kenneth Walker. So he's played 15 games in both of those seasons. And I think there will be times where we look at Kenneth Walker and we're like, yo, this looks like an elite back. And then there's other times we look at Kenneth Walker and we're like, man, I wish we could get more out of him. So this O-line has improved. The Seahawks invested in their offensive line this offseason. So we know he's a home run hitter. If we see more of that next season, then Kenneth Walker is going to be of value. But I also think Zach Charbonnet, who was involved in the passing game, should have a little bit of upside and probably will take away some work from Kenneth Walker. We can count on the 17 to 20 carries. It's just, do we have more than 2 to 3 targets in a game with Kenneth Walker? I doubt it. So I think he'll still be a strong RB2. I think he'll just be limited as far as the ceiling on a seasonal basis, not on a weekly basis, but on a seasonal basis. When it comes to Zach Charbonnet, last year, he played well in his rookie season, played well in a complimentary role. A lot of people were concerned, like, is he going to be the starter? Will he take a lot of Ken Walker's touches? And obviously, that was not the case. He played a complimentary role, and he played it well. You have to assume this year he's going to take some kind of touches, some more work away. Like, you have to kind of assume that. And he could have some upside mid-season, I would say, but he only had 3 double-digit games last year as a rookie, which kind of lets you know, like, he has some work to do. And then he had a chance to start 2 games as well. Kenneth Walker was out. He had, around 10 points both games, 12.9 and 9.8. So I'm not really big on Zach Charbonnet taking over like a lot of work this season. I still think he plays a complimentary role. We'll have to see how this new offense looks to get real value out of Zach Charbonnet, or if he's going to be anything more than just like a flex during bye weeks if something happens to Kenneth Walker. Because for now, I don't think he's draftable. And even if he does take over the starting role, I'm not sure that he has like, anything more than RB3 appeal if he did. All right, let's go to the receivers. It's the same receivers. We got DK Metcalf, Jaxon Smith-Njigba, Tyler Lockett. And DK Metcalf is the rock, and he's been elite for some time now, but he finished as the wide receiver 21 last season. Kind of a down year for DK standards, right? He's been, he's had 3 straight top 16 finishes, and I mean, he had over 1,000 yards, 1,100 yards, 8 touchdowns. He has 66 receptions. So that's the big number that dropped. That's the lowest since his rookie year, on only 119 targets, which is also the lowest since his rookie season. Jaxon Smith-Njigba came into the fold, and, GENO played. He was locked in with DK the year before. It's like this ball got spread around a little bit more than it did the season previous. So he only had 3 games under double-digit touchdowns, which are double-digit fantasy points, which lets me know that he's either going to get it with the yards, he's going to get it with the touchdowns, or potentially with the catches. But the volume is concerning. The dip in volume is very concerning for DK, as his team does look to get their younger player, Jaxon Smith-Njigba, who's a first-round pick, involved. I mean, he was a star at Washington, but DK himself has been a star in the league for so long and is just now entering his prime. He was drafted young, only 26 years old. Like, there's a lot more to grow when it comes to DK Metcalf. So I'm kind of confused here because I want to say DK can be still an elite fantasy performer. And if we can get him out, in this wide receiver 20 to 25 range, I think there's a lot of value for DK Metcalf. But this offense is changing, and we don't know what it's going to look like this upcoming season. There's going to be some change. And is it going to be DK's the focus? JSN's the focus? Still a lot to be determined. There's a lot of valuable pieces within this offense, and DK is the cornerstone of it. It's just, are we going to get more of the DK we saw from last year with less targets, or are we going to get an increased usage out of him, which I kind of doubt. I think he's going to hover around the same value, somewhere in the 15 to 20 range when it comes to receivers. Might get a little bit of value on him, but the upside that we're used to and accustomed to having with DK just doesn't seem like it's there with this offense. With JSN there, like I said, we had a lot of hype for Jaxon Smith-Njigba coming into this season. Obviously came in, he had an injured hand coming into the year. It took him a while to get going. He was the wide receiver 48 on the season, which we were expecting more. Just put it that way. We were expecting more out of JSN. He had 63 catches, 628 yards, and 4 touchdowns. And that was also in the third. He was a third on the pecking order when it came to receivers. He was behind Tyler Lockett and behind DK Metcalf. I think this season we have to assume, seeing that Tyler Lockett took a reduction in pay, we have to assume JSN is going to be a more vital part of the offense this year, and he'll need to show it, obviously. He should have more volume this year, a lot more volume. I would expect that at least, and he seemed to be pretty happy about the coordinator change this offseason, talking about it. So he could look different. He could look different this year, but we also need to see it. I'm expecting some promise, but until Tyler Lockett is completely out of the fold, I'm not expecting like this rise to top 15 wide receiver. I think he'll look more like a wide receiver 3 this season for our fantasy teams, more like a top 25 to 30 receiver in real football. But he's going to need to take a big step up in either the receptions department, the yardage department, or the touchdown department in order to see it. It wouldn't surprise me if he had his first 1,000-yard season, but it would shock me to see him with like 8 to 10 touchdowns or anywhere around the 80 catch marker. So I like JSN. I think he'll have a better season this year. Not the leap that you might be hoping for, especially if you're rostering him in Dynasty. And then as far as Tyler Lockett goes, After 6 straight seasons in the top 20, he finished as a wide receiver 32. It was time, and he's getting older now. He's 31. He still had a strong season: 79 catches, 894 yards, and 5 touchdowns. It's just 5 times undefeated. And in this offense, he's kept himself healthy over the years, even though he has a smaller frame. It's just his role is going to be decreasing now that JSN is another year here in Seattle. So he restructured his contract to stay in Seattle, as I mentioned before, but this is going to be the DK and JSN show, and Tyler Lockett, unfortunately, is going to be the third piece in that receiving core this season instead of being the second. So, I like Tyler Lockett, and he could be a value depending on where his ADP is. But for now, I'm probably staying away. There's just not a whole lot of upside, and the writing's kind of on the wall for him to have a down season. Now, could he provide a top 40 season fantasy-wise? I 100% think that. And he's a good enough to receiver to where he's still going to make himself available. He has rapport with Geno Smith. It's just we know this offense is going to look a little different, and the passing attack is going to be led through, like I said, the 2 initials, DK and JSN. And then at tight end, Noah Fant, who wasn't really relevant fantasy-wise last year. He was a tight end 32. He only had 1 double-digit game, but for me, I have a little bit of optimism about him coming into this year. Before this last season in 2023, he had never finished as anything lower than the tight end 17. Never. And then last year to go to tight end 32 is crazy. He had no touchdowns last year on 400 yards. So Colby Parkinson's gone. Will Dissly's gone. These are guys that had rotated in and out at tight end. Noah Fant is their guy now. They traded for him, and now he will be their guy. So when he came over from the Broncos, he was the tight end 17 that season. Obviously a fall off last year, but if he can just increase the touchdowns and now get a little bit extra yardage in this offense, who knows? Maybe we can see a top 15 season out of Noah Fant. I'm not overly optimistic, but to me, it's not out of the realm of possibilities just due to what we've seen in the past, all right? So that does it for the Seattle episode. Let me know your guys' thoughts in the comments or if there's any players that I missed. Until then, I'll see you on the next one. Peace out.